So, nice to meet you again for some guys, and sorry for the French guy that is here because this is a presentation that I've also done in French. So, but here the difference is that it's really intended to be more interactive. So I really want to discuss with you about what you are doing, what I am doing on Citrix projects. So please feel free to talk with me. It's always good to have lots of sharp minds in the same room talking about best practices, experiences, and that's how we can improve together. So also feel free to tweet about the session. And to gain some time, I won't introduce myself too much. They said that I am the guy behind CitrixTools.net, and I am doing Citrix consultancy for 12 years now. So, the idea is that we are all dealing with more and more complex environments. With virtual applications, installed applications, virtual desktops, and lots of flavors for virtual desktops, and also with fat desktops. That's something we don't see in the FlexCast model, but there are fat desktops, and there will be fat desktops for some years, I guess.
Most definitely.
Most definitely, yes. Also, we are dealing with these desktops, but why? Just to provide access to applications. Desktop is just a way to access to applications. Desktop is not the application itself, because you need a desktop, because it's the interface. Maybe once it will be a web page or something. You need an interface to access your application, and users do need this to do their day-to-day job. Some days ago, I had a session saying, just always think about your user, get their expectations, and try to live a day in their shoes to understand what they do expect from IT. Because we can design the most complex environment. If it sucks, it sucks. So for a user, we need to work to make them accept the solution. So we can deal with all deployment strategies. You can also cross the deployment strategies. So that's where it begins to be funky. Or I need to reconnect to something, and I have lost something. So it can be fun. That's a pragmatic view of the FlexCast model.
Yeah.
It's not that straightforward. We just need to get good performances. And that's it. If your login time sucks, your login time sucks. And that's what the users do see. I've talked with APPDNA guys when they were acquired by Citrix. They had the XenDesktop provided. They just tried it once. Why? Because it was a 2 minutes login desktop. They just say we will stick to the fat one. So that's really important. We need to deal about. It's all about tuning and make it the fastest possible, just for users to be happy. I have a big customer in France. He's doing software as a service, and he has 30,000 users on XenApp. The login times were 2 minutes and 30 seconds, and they got sued by the customers because it was not meeting the good user experience they expected for a SaaS provider. So now it's 10 seconds. So it's far way better. But that's also really important to see that we all want an iPad-like, iPhone-like experience. You just unlock it, it's displayed, it's fast, it's working. And users, they don't want to wait for the application to start, they just want to do their job, and that's it. They're not using IT like us for fun or to do complex stuff. They just need a button, some instruction. But we can't forget something, is that these task workers, these are the users that make the company earn the money that will pay us, and that will make the company grow or not. So it's really important, because IT is not almighty like it was. We now need to care about users and service agreements, and to do it the fastest possible. So then, to have the, let's say, the best performing environment, I have some focus points I have detailed in this slide, and I won't give much information in the slides. Okay, it's a really short presentation because I want to talk with you. I want to see if we faced the same issues, for example, and how we'll explain how I've dealt with them, and it's really interesting to get your feedback on this. For example, about server virtualization. Now, what I'm saying with my customers that I have the virtualization guy, and everything is good for virtualization. Every server is a candidate for virtualization. 4 weeks ago, I was working on a big project. It's 20,000 users, and there was a VMware consultant saying that vSphere is so powerful that it can virtualize up to 10 XenApp servers on a single box, for example. vSphere is powerful, so I just told him that there were some project reality check things that were allowed by VMware and that you should have read at it. But I think you have all met that kind of guy thinking that virtualization is for every workload. I don't virtualize XenApp when I don't need to, but when I'm dealing with provisioning services or when I want flexibility, virtualization is something I will consider, but at the cost of less user on the same box for 64-bit OSs. So,
do you have any rough numbers? How much overhead the hypervisor actually adds?
From what you have seen, it's between 20 and 30.
So much, so roughly a quarter less.
Yes.
That's a lot.
On 64-bit. That's not
What
the
are
same
the
for
others?
Yeah, that actually can be a negative number, right? Because virtualized 32 XenApps on the 64-bit obviously hypervisor, you can actually get higher user density than the physical boxes. Those are pretty well-known papers from HP.
No.
Higher user count than on the physical hardware.
But
In my personal experience, right now, I will personally not recommend anybody doing physical XenApps, period. If you have a small deployment, sure. If you have a couple of XenApp servers and more, do a hypervisor. The different. I'll give you a simple example, right? I was working for China Hospitals, right? And we put ourselves a bunch of pizza boxes, physical, that we were supposed to stream to provisioning server. And my ticket made it on the front page of Citrix support website when I found out that we could stream for specific Dell hardware, which is basically for the most part all Dell hardware, like R610, R810, R910. There was a problem that you couldn't stream to anything but the master server. So the problem was resolved in half a year by Microsoft providing a patch. So it was not really a Citrix problem per se, right? And when after that 2002, SP1 was released, there was another half a year before Microsoft released another patch. So here's the example: you don't put abstraction layer, right? You're doomed. Right? If you support the environment of any site, you never know what will happen. The backplane driver is replaced. The video driver is buggy. That was a problem with Dell years before that. Right? So, and there was no driver for 3 months. So I don't want to take chances in enterprise that I have to redo my images because my hardware is different. Or let's say I bought slightly different server, I have to have another gold image for that.
Okay, understand.
So the abstraction is very important. Now, the question comes in about scalability. I don't see this.
Yes, but that's what I was saying.
Other figures. What numbers do you get for virtualization? How many? What would the performance effect?
It depends on the application. It depends a lot on the application.
Yes, please present me.
No, but that's the thing. Normally, before 64-bit, we would always first say they have to run on a hypervisor, XenApp servers. You have to virtualize them. Now with 46-bit XenApp servers, you just see the number count go down, the user count go down, so you need more virtual servers to get the same amount of users. It's not bad because it's also if one host goes down, you lose less users.
You cannot lose 25% of your server, right? If you virtualize it, you can easily lose one VM.
Yeah, but if we have one host,
the rest of them are still.
Now, from what we have seen, we have done lots of load testings for a big customer to decide whether to virtualize or not. we decided to virtualize because we were using PVS. That was the introduction. PVS, for me, implies virtualization, to have one single identity.
You don't want to build them by hand?
Yes.
Or use
but if you are not using PVS, that could be another story.
Yeah.
But when you add more VMs on 64-bit platform, what we have seen, we used a child for load testing, is that the one more VM does not provide that much users. All users still are spread on all VMs equally, but if you look at VRC, we found almost the same results. So you really lose 25% because of the virtualization stacks.
What do you have a reference? What hypervisor did you test it on, or you tested
we tested on vSphere 5, yes.
With 5?
Yes, with
5. Has a major improvement versus 4. Interesting, okay.
We tested with 5, yes, and XenApp 6.5.
I really cannot understand how, by using a hypervisor, you lose, but you lose 25 users. It looks in my eyes as a huge number, 25 users.
Yes.
Just for putting the virtual.
Yeah, it was just.
Do you agree that it looks a huge number?
We've done a VRC test from PQR and Login Consultant. And when I first read that report, I haven't done the test myself, and I first read that report, I was also like, that's a huge number. But it really is like that.
Yes, actually, XenApp is used to gather lots of users on the same box. So it's already doing some consolidation, and it's switching with lots of context switches, okay? And then when you add the hypervisor, it's done to do context switches, but on less intensive loads. So when you add this layer, you have 2 levels of context switches, and that's where the system got lost, because it's switching really fast on the XenApp side, and then it has to switch really fast on the hypervisor side, and because of some memory shadowing caching processes, you get lost. That's what we add as an explanation, because of the specific load of XenApp on 64-bit. Also because on 32-bit, you add the 2 GB kernel limit. So you were limited with the user number. On 64-bit, you don't have this limit.
But it's quite interesting that 32-bit workloads on 64-bit hypervisors do have advantage of actually being able to deliver better user density. Is it on the same piece of hardware when you run a 64-bit OS on top of this?
But on 32-bit, you have less user.
No, sure. But what I do, I take a big box, cut it on small chunks.
Yes.
Say 4 gigs, maybe 6 gigs at the most.
But for the test we have done,
limitation.
For the test we have done 2 to 3 XenApp VM, 64-bit per hypervisor. That's something that is not that bad.
And the reason for scalability is that if you take a look at memory overhead when you go through WoW translation, if you run your 32-bit apps, right? Obviously, you cannot run 16-bit apps, right? But when you run 32-bit apps or 64-bit environment, you take a look at memory overhead versus running it natively in 32-bit.
It's about the same.
Yeah.
So it depends on the application.
It's about
the way they handle the bytes.
Yes.
We've seen users that need up to 800 meg of memory for their session to just do an application, because the application uses a lot of private bytes.
Yeah.
And then you're stuck.
So, you want still to talk about the virtualization or not? No? Okay, let's go ahead. Microsoft. Very important one. Why? Because when you design virtual desktop, let's call it virtual desktop, it could be easier, it could be XenApp, XenDesktop, RDS, whatever we want. I've seen this Microsoft architecture being neglected by lots of people. On the same project, they expected one domain controller to handle 10,000 recurrent logouts. That was the first thing. And as virtualization consultant, maybe some of you are, but I am not that into the Active Directory stuff. I can just do recommendations. But now I have a close look at everything just to ensure it won't be an issue later in the project. So it's all about core services, Active Directory, DNS, but also about GPOs. That's what I am seeing almost every day. You know, the same GPO linked in some organizational units with some nice names, servers, Citrix, tasks. And that's not what I would recommend to do, and that's more what we are doing. That's a very big environment, but if GPU are correctly named, you can identify that they are linked to a Citrix environment, and it's the same GPU linked at a specific level, organization level, and only when needed. For example, if you have the licensing, RDS licensing, it will be linked at the top of organizational unit. And that's really important to prevent some bad administrator who has never seen a bad administrator. Okay? So to prevent some administrators to fuck up the system, because it's all about we are designing the system, we are integrating the systems. It's working for 1 week, 2 weeks, 1 month, 2 months, 1 year. It depends.
Until you leave the customer.
We don't leave. That's why I have started to automate things and to create single button push tool, just because my customers won't break the system. They just have to push the button. And that's also why when I'm naming, for example, organizational units, that's the same name with the folders. It matches the folders in the Citrix console, for example, just for everyone to know it's matching the organizations. So that was another example. The Citrix one, the design is important, but it's not that difficult. Then it's just a problem of scalability. Data collectors, for XenApp, for example. Okay, with the XenDesktop 5, you need a SQL cluster for every Citrix product. But then you need to know about some numbers. Sometimes it's really difficult to have some numbers. For example, I had to design web interface for 200,000 users, roughly something like 60,000 users concurrently. That was the Logan storm. And I called the Citrix PM to know if he had some figures. Say, no, but if you find it, please give it back to me. It will be really interesting. So,
we haven't seen the blog yet.
With 40, no blog yet. Because with such an infrastructure, in France we would know who is the customer, so it's really difficult. But at the end of the day, with 40 web interface servers, virtual, we were able to handle the load.
Well, how is the number of XenApp servers that people need to support the web servers?
For 40 web servers, they have something like 2,500 XenApp servers.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that to feed those web servers with XML data, how many XenApp servers do you actually need dedicated for that? I presume you're not pointing to 1 or 2, right?
No. But for the specific customer, is doing what we can call a worst practice, which means every application has its own form.
What?
Yes. So, but that's like this, and you cannot change it. And they are using their intranet as the main entry point. And the application list is in the intranet. So then the web interface is just creating the IK file. So I've made a modification of the web interface code, just knowing the application to bind only the specific form. So in this particular design, you don't have enumeration problems, because for every application, it's only contacting the specified file.
You said 2,500 servers, right? 45,000.
I can't hear you, sorry.
You said 40,000 users, right?
60.
16,000, it's the store. It's a store. Okay. It's a store. Also,
by the way, what kind of load balancer did you use, or was it just from the customer?
it was in-house load balancers with in-house proxies, so they have already everything to handle such a load.
Sounds like a good case for somebody to sell an ASCII.
Yes, that's why some guys are trying to do, but it's really difficult. With such companies, when you want to sell something,
It's an interesting point that they have different farm tabs.
Yes, and actually they had two very big Solaris servers handling the load, but they developed based on Enfuse 1.0 the IK file generator, and it was generating crap into the IK file. So when Citrix introduced an integrity check of the IK file, it was not working. So they were not able to migrate their users.
Now, with all this effort, why would you use that web interface?
Yeah.
Like, why won't you just parse XML directly from your
They did it to go back to something more supported.
Yes.
And that's also why a requirement of the code modification was to make them as light as possible.
Now, do you sign by the way C files in your institution or?
Yes, the web interface is just popping up.
No, but the one saying, are you signing? Do you put digital signatures on your C files, or you just basically?
Yes. Yes. The web interface is just adding some extra command line options that we will get back at the server level to run the applications. So also, Citrix configuration is not optimized. By default, almost everything is open. So like ports, mappings, and so what I'm doing is that my integration tools are creating default policies just to lock down the system. It has a great impact on logins because you don't open unneeded virtual channel drivers, and you can also enable all optimizations that are not enabled. So that's one of my recommendations. Then you can create more policies just to allow some features for some users. But I am enabling all optimizations, disabling scanners, ports. I am using only network printer, non-network printer mapping, even if then I have to create a new one, just like a firewall. Create a policy that will block everything that you would not need. And I found that it's a really good way to improve performances also. Do you have any comment?
It's all intranet implementation in that case? It's intranet, right?
No.
They're coming from intranet?
When?
Are you
Yes.
using Access Gateway for anything of this? VPN or?
Yes, Access Gateway.
Access Gateway.
Mainly.
So there is Access Gateway in front of it that can handle all this load. How many, you mentioned you have 480 web interfaces. How many Access Gateways do you have in front of it?
For the big one,
Yeah.
they don't have Access Gateway. Sorry. I was
It's all
talking in general.
internal, right?
Yes, in general. Storage, the first point. Even XenApp requires lots IOPS, and that's something that you should really consider. That's something that is also forgotten when you virtualize XenApp, because for lots of my customers, they consider it as a standard workload, and they send it into the cloud without knowing that XenApp has a really high IOPS footprint. And even if you are using PVS, you still need lots of IOPS for the cache. We started, my current employer, even if it's only for 2 weeks now, they are a cloud provider, and we designed a XenApp XenDesktop Platinum integration for some retail shops. I said the IOPS will be a problem, as my employer is an hard drive provider. They said, "Oh, you are the Citrix guy. Do not care about the IOPS. We will design the storage and something." And the customer is using Oracle database and also XenApp provisioning server cache on the same bay. Now they are forced to buy a new bay, a new storage, just to handle XenApp PVS cache load, and it's really intensive. So XenApp requires IOPS. You have solutions like Atlantis for XenApp to minimize the footprint, but on very big environments, be careful, because even talking about 20 IOPS per user, you still are not able to handle some peaks, because it depends on the applications. But for a standard workload, we have monitored for 1 year with some critical business applications. We came to an average, but not the average, the average of the peaks of 20 IOPS per user, and even with that, we cannot handle all peaks. So which means for 10,000 concurrent users, it's really lots of IOs. So,
And if you do cache to RAM,
you can cache to RAM, but from what I've seen, it's not really stable.
No, it's not stable.
From what I've seen, it's not stable.
We are running a project now. We're still in the pilot phase, but we have the pilot phase now cache to RAM.
Yes.
We had some iOS problems there. And we haven't experienced any problems yet, so we were now discussing internally.
It's for single tenant. As far as I understand, the Arden's implementation, when they went against, let's say, PCs with no hard drives, it was primarily designed for desktop workloads. Well, they have workstation workload. So from my perspective, if you stream, let's say, XenDesktop, I don't see there should be any problem really to stream it to RAM. The only challenge is that you're paying quite a bit for that improvement, and frankly, you can get around it actually with mechanical stuff that I talked yesterday about, right? But if you look at multi-user work, multi-tenant VMs, there are some challenges because if you run some benchmarking tools against basically the caching in RAM, this is not really a real disk, okay? So you might find some situations when your app will crash basically the server. One of the examples, try to run 82 benchmark, then page 32, against the system that will stream in RAM, and you quite likely won't be able to blue screen your logs.
Yes, that's what I've seen. If you're out of RAM, you have a...
No, not out of RAM. You're fine. You have plenty of space. We're not talking about running out of space for the cache, right? You have plenty of space, but it's not really a true disk.
Yes.
No, so we've been testing also with the RAM disk.
Yeah. So in other words, for XenDesktop should be fine, again, as long as you can afford it, and as long as you don't run out of space. XenApp, it's just there are better ways of doing it.
And also, if you are doing PVS, for example, you will need, or you may want to redirect event logs, redirect system dumps, redirect sites database. So that's also, if you think about the cache, all users' profiles, they are in the cache. So if your user profile is 100 megabytes and you have something like 100 or 200 users on your box, it will also need lots of memory. So you have to consider this when you have IOs. Because from what I've seen, when PVS is out of RAM for the cache, you got a blue screen.
So it's very rare to see people actually doing it in RAM.
We had a project that the customer is not finished with the data center. But
as long as it works for you guys, be mindful about
we are testing it now with different scenarios and also with the page file differences and page file C or on D and a RAM disk and everything. So we will write a blog about it, but what we experienced there, because so far customer is happy. That's the most important first, and the customer is happy, and we haven't experienced real bad things yet. And I know that there should be blue screens and there should be hell breaking loose at that.
No. The product is good. The question is, are you using it for what it was designed for?
No, I know.
And it's a single user, right? So you're talking about XenDesktop, right? Or
XenApp.
Oh, you actually
XenApp, that's XenApp.
So how many users?
Now we have 2 servers with 40 users, so it's not that much. We get.
So how many memory are you using?
The memory we're using is 4-5 gig.
Per server?
Per server.
Extra.
And
how often do you reboot? Sorry, Ken.
Reboot.
Every hour?
No, every week or so we reboot.
Yeah, it's pretty low. So it looks like you just,
I'm sure. But it's also dependent on the application and the user. So that's the trick we are going to see when we add more users to that pilot, and they are using different applications.
It's a pilot. It's a pilot.
It's still a pilot. We should be in production already, but customers.
I feel like we can talk after.
Yeah. I have a colleague who's really deep diving into all the setups.
Say anything about user profile redirect.
He doesn't tweet at my site. That's how he.
That's why it was called chapter 1, because when you started such discussions, you always need more time to talk about it. Be careful with login script, GPPs, and UEM solutions. Login scripts, GPPs slow down the logons.
I will be careful actually with the comment. PVS does not really help. For the reason being, you offload some of your storage-related traffic to your network, right? You offload this thing from your configuration controllers or whatever HBAs that you use. So there are situations that PVS actually work better dealing with your bootstraps and stuff.
With REDs, PVS does not really help for write IOs.
Okay, but the challenge is this: you offload it when you boot. you offloaded 90% of your I/O, which is read, to your network. You end up with 10%, which is split, let's say 80-20, 90-10, right? So the deal is that PVS did help. When they boot your system, all this stuff never hit your storage, it hit the RAM on the machine. So from my perspective, PVS, actually, if you carefully look at the lifetime of the VM, in some areas, PVS actually extremely helpful in comparison to any other means of delivering.
Yes, but it's not helping you to decrease the fact that IOPS are really important.
Or you're decreasing IOPS by 90% when you boot the machine from PVS. You're decreasing
Yes,
IOPS
but
from storage.
you still need lots of rooms to handle the cache.
Oh, sure. But what I'm saying is that you offloaded 90%. That's a big number. But we'll talk about it. But, yeah.
Okay, so be careful with logins because login scripts, bad login scripts, GPPs are slowing down the system. And even I was talking about this in my previous session. Even if it's not at the start of the project, the way Microsoft is handling the history with per machine XML files, it's also the case with PVS. When you reboot, you have to wait long on applying computer settings, for example. It could be fine at the beginning of the project, and 3 months later, it's just 1 minute more of logouts, and 3 months later, then so you have to be careful. UEM solutions can also help on this, but you still have to make it simple. You should really be careful on login times because sometimes it's neglected, you know. And I've seen so many login times from 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and no, that's 3 minutes, that's okay, but for the end user, that's not okay. That's unacceptable. So, about the tuning. So, I wrote some articles. You can find lots of articles on how to tune the server. Always be careful with the tuning tips because they can have side effects. I received one email, guy saying, your tuning is shit because after the tuning, the application is not working, so you owe me 3 days of consulting. I said, when I have an issue, the first thing I'm doing is removing the tuning. Just when I have a strange issue, that's the first thing I'm doing, actually. It was a really good developed application, and because the cursor blinking was disabled, the application was crashed. So, okay, but always know what you are doing and just don't read something on the internet. But if you want to gather some things from what I have been seeing, I am able to increase really the perceived performance of the XenApp servers by doing hardcore tuning. So even Windows has a limited worker number, which means it is limited in its multi-threading capabilities. You can increase it. It's also some things you will find on how to optimize your desktop, your fat desktop performance, and that also works for XenApp servers. And I have been able to have more stable servers and more performance servers. We can talk about it for hours, but I have integrated all of this in an automated solution. So now I don't have to remember all the reg values, but I will just tell you a story. I just migrated an 8,000 users customer, XenApp Platinum. He had something like 200 support calls per week because of disconnections and bad performances. Post-migration, 0.
Wow.
Just because Microsoft tagged tuning of the network interfaces, disable Chimney, disable RSS, disable TCP/IP, for example, and also with modifying the TCP/IP stack just to handle less smaller packets, for example. So it's really helpful, and you have settings like I/O page lock limits that allows you to use an amount of the RAM to pre-cache or I/O operations. It helps for writes, but it also helps for application launch. So you have a perceived experience of an application launch being like SSD. And that's really true for Office, Adobe Reader or something. So tips and tricks, that's something I've done. It's not really, let's say, professional, but it's working. And I've talked with this with the PVS PM. He told me, oh, that's smart. And what did I do? I just created a script that is launched at autolog, and that is loading all applications post-reboot. So I have developed, I can share it if you want, a small console application that is gracefully closing the application. It's not a kill. It's like if you hit the close button, it's sending the same message. And
So you're just sending the message to the app to close the close
yes,
message?
yeah. You can use the process name or process ID.
The question though is, if you're not the parent of the app, on the Windows 2008 R2, you said you won't be able to do it because you don't have the privilege. So you have to be a privileged process unless you are a parent process trying to do it. So
Yes, that's because I am launching them in
Also
the
your
script.
parent process.
Yes, and I have to fall back to autolog, by the way. And it's loading all applications in shared memory. If you have tuning, everything is preloaded using the tuning. And if you are using PVS, you have populated the cache just after reboot. So it's done at night, not on the morning, because I had this issue when you reboot, staging reboot over the week, the first logon, some first logon are slower, some first application launches are slower. And if you talk with the end users, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad.
Yeah.
So, and now it's always good.
Hey Pierre,
2 minutes.
is that available from a link, or do we ask you about it?
Ask me.
Okay.
Ask me. And I have no time to upload it somewhere. So, and the last one is tips and tricks, just about the pure performances. What I am doing now on every project, I am working with users to find a bandwidth limit for the users. Moreover, when it's 1, when it's LAN, I do not care, but when it's 1, I do care. Why? Because when you deploy site, not on one deployment, but progressively, users get used to their experience. So even if it's excellent on the first days, on the second day you add more users, and as XenApp is taking what it can take, or XenDesktop also IPA, then I had some users saying it was better before we added more users. And at the end of the day, it was still excellent, but that's the difference between very good and excellent. So you can deliver them a very good service that will be okay. So that's a trick I am using. I'm always setting a bandwidth limit so they are used to a specific experience, and that's the same experience whether you have 10 users or 20 users, if, of course, the one link is okay.
So you never show them performance for one user, right?
Yes, that's so true, but that's the same for us. How many of you are using an SSD? No. Who is using an SSD? Just raise. Okay. Would you go back to a standard hard drive for your operating system? So that's it. That's it. That's it.
On the last question and answers. Okay.